At first glance, Jungkook's transition to a more US-centered music career might seem like a natural extension of his international fame. After all, he had already broken records with solo releases, collaborated with American producers, and topped Billboard charts. Yet, the decision to actively embed himself in the US scene feels different. It signals not just an experiment, but a commitment. A statement that Jungkook is more than a Korean idol. He is aiming to be a global pop star on par with the biggest names in America. For HYBE, this creates both an opportunity and a dilemma. On one hand, Jungkook's success in the US elevates the company's profile. On the other, it raises unsettling questions. Can they maintain control of their brightest star? What happens if Jungkook's identity as a US artist grows stronger than his role as a BTS member under HYBE's structure? And most importantly, what if his choices start to conflict with the company's own long-term strategies? HYBE knows this well. Their business model has, in many ways, leaned heavily on BTS's global dominance. And within that, Jungkook has consistently been a focal point. He has headlined Calvin Klein campaigns, become the face of numerous brand endorsements, and pulled staggering streaming numbers with solo work. When one individual holds that much power within a company's portfolio, any move they make outside the structure automatically creates anxiety. The moment Jungkook began aligning himself with US producers and labels, the whispers grew louder. Was this a strategic partnership under HYBE's full blessing? Or was it a gradual step toward independence? For a company that thrives on keeping talent centralized, even the hint of autonomy from its biggest star can spark unease. There's no denying why the US market holds such attraction for Jungkook. For decades, America has been considered the epicenter of global pop music, dominating the Billboard charts, performing at the Grammys, collaborating with US superstars. These milestones are often viewed as the ultimate markers of success for international artists. Jungkook, with his vocal versatility, performance skills, and already established global fanbase, is uniquely positioned to break through where many others have failed. Unlike most K-pop idols who face challenges of language, cultural barriers, or lack of recognition, Jungkook arrives with millions of fans already demanding his presence in the American scene. His music, especially English-language singles, has shown he can compete directly with US stars on their own turf. But this same allure creates friction. The more he grows in the US, the less dependent he becomes on the K-pop framework that HYBE has carefully built. What happens if Jungkook decides he no longer needs HYBE to mediate his international career? For the company, that's not just a hypothetical, it's a potential crisis. HYBE's position is complicated. Publicly, they must appear supportive of Jungkook's ambitions. After all, his success reflects positively on their brand. But privately, they must calculate the risks. An artist who becomes too powerful can destabilize even the most carefully managed entertainment company. It's worth noting that HYBE's business model relies heavily on diversification, acquiring other labels, expanding into technology, and building fan platforms like Weverse. Yet none of these ventures have the cultural weight or financial pull that Jungkook provides. If he were to distance himself, the company would not only lose revenue, but also risk a blow to its image as the home of the world's biggest stars. Thus, HYBE faces a delicate balancing act. They must support Jungkook enough to keep him loyal, while quietly working to ensure he doesn't gain so much independence that he can walk away. This tension is at the heart of the current unease surrounding his US activities. Jungkook's American move also comes at a sensitive time for BTS. With military enlistments, individual projects, and shifting dynamics, the group is in a transitional phase. Fans worldwide are waiting for their full reunion. But in the meantime, solo endeavors have taken center stage. For Jungkook, the US market represents not just a career expansion, but a chance to carve out a unique identity. For HYBE, however, this threatens to shift the balance within BTS itself. If Jungkook becomes too prominent as a US artist, will it overshadow the group's eventual comeback? Will fans start seeing him less as BTS's Jungkook and more as Jungkook, the US superstar? These questions matter because BTS has always thrived on unity. Their brand is built on the image of 7 individuals moving as one. If that balance fractures, HYBE risks losing the very foundation of its empire. Beyond the business implications, there's also an emotional layer to this story. Jungkook's decision to pursue the US market speaks to his personal ambition, his desire to test his limits and prove himself on the biggest stage possible. For fans, this is both inspiring and nerve-wracking. They want to see him succeed, but they also fear what it might mean for BTS's future. HYBE, too, must wrestle with this emotion. On one level, they understand Jungkook's growth is natural and even necessary. On another, they fear losing control of the very artist who helped build their empire. It's a classic story of an individual outgrowing the institution that nurtured them, a story as old as the entertainment industry itself. The US music industry is no stranger to international talent, but Jungkook's arrival feels different. He is not just another foreign artist trying to break into the market, he is already a global superstar with a proven track record. His every move is closely followed, not only by fans but also by record labels, producers, and executives, who see him as both an opportunity and a challenge. For American artists, Jungkook represents new competition. For American labels, he represents potential collaboration or even acquisition. And for the media, he represents a narrative of cultural convergence, where the barriers between K-pop and Western pop are dissolving before our eyes. On the other side of the equation sits the US music industry, always ready to capitalize on opportunity. To American record labels, Jungkook is not just another artist, he's a phenomenon with a pre-packaged global audience. Unlike most up-and-coming musicians, he doesn't need years of brand building or expensive marketing campaigns. He arrives with a fandom that spans continents and a digital presence that guarantees millions of streams within hours of release. Executives in Los Angeles and New York understand this dynamic well. They know that by aligning with Jungkook, they don't just sign an artist, they inherit a ready-made empire of fans willing to follow him anywhere. For these labels, the question is not whether they want Jungkook, but how far they're willing to go to secure him. This competitive interest only deepens HYBE's concern. The company is aware that US labels can offer Jungkook a kind of creative freedom and industry support that he may not fully experience under their system. If he feels more valued or more creatively fulfilled in America, what incentive would he have to remain tied exclusively to HYBE? To counter this risk, HYBE must walk a fine line. Pulling Jungkook back too tightly could alienate him and create tension that fans would notice immediately. Giving him too much freedom, however, could empower him to pursue contracts and deals outside their control. This creates a scenario that resembles a corporate chess game. HYBE has to position itself not just as Jungkook's employer, but as his most reliable long-term partner. They must convince him and the world that their infrastructure, resources, and vision are superior to anything American labels can offer. Yet doing so without appearing insecure or restrictive is a task easier said than done. The company's challenge is not just business, it's psychological. They need Jungkook to believe that HYBE understands his ambitions, supports his independence, and still offers value he cannot find elsewhere. If they fail to communicate this balance, the risks of him drifting further into the orbit of US music executives grow higher with every passing day. While business calculations dominate HYBE's boardrooms, another force quietly shapes the trajectory of Jungkook's US venture: his fans. Known globally as ARMY, BTS's fandom is not just loyal, they are organized, influential, and deeply protective of the members. Their reactions, both supportive and critical, can steer narratives in ways even corporations struggle to control. So far, fans have embraced Jungkook's US projects with enthusiasm, pushing his singles to record-breaking streaming numbers and ensuring his live performances trend globally. This support demonstrates that his personal brand is strong enough to transcend national boundaries. However, this same fanbase also amplifies the tension. Many armies remain deeply attached to the idea of BTS as a united group. They celebrate solo success, but they also keep asking the same question: what does this mean for the group's future? If Jungkook's US career grows too dominant, could it delay or overshadow BTS's reunion? These concerns are expressed daily across social media, and HYBE monitors them closely. Fan perception is critical because it influences HYBE's long-term strategies. If the narrative shifts toward Jungkook being seen as drifting too far from BTS, the company risks fan backlash. If the fandom begins to believe that HYBE is restricting Jungkook's growth, they risk another form of backlash, accusations of holding him back. It's a fragile balance, and HYBE knows it. It would be a mistake to frame this solely as a US career dynamic. Jungkook's move has global implications. In Europe, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, his success is being watched with fascination. Audiences in these regions are increasingly consuming US, Korean hybrid pop, and Jungkook represents the most prominent example of this fusion. For these international fans, Jungkook's move symbolizes the globalization of pop itself. He is proof that the industry is no longer divided into regional silos, but is instead converging into a single, borderless marketplace where artists can belong everywhere at once. This makes him both an icon and a test case. If Jungkook succeeds in sustaining a dual identity as a US artist and a K-pop idol, the model may be replicated by future stars. HYBE, however, cannot ignore the risk that such global attention creates. The more Jungkook becomes a universal figure, the harder it is for the company to frame him as exclusively theirs. In a world where borders no longer define music, the question becomes, who really owns a global star? The numbers behind this dilemma are staggering. Analysts estimate that BTS has contributed more than 50% of HYBE's revenue during their peak years. Even as the company expands into other areas, gaming, intellectual property, and new groups, BTS remains its foundation. Within that foundation, Jungkook is consistently one of the highest earning and most marketable members. If he were to pursue independent ventures in America that diminish HYBE's share of his revenue, the impact would be immediate. Investors would notice, stock prices would fluctuate, and rival companies would smell weakness. For a corporation of HYBE's size, perception is often just as important as reality. A single narrative of losing control over Jungkook could trigger a cascade of financial consequences. Despite all the numbers and strategies, there's no ignoring the emotional undercurrent. Jungkook himself has often expressed his gratitude to HYBE and his loyalty to BTS. Yet, he is also a young artist at the peak of his creativity, eager to test his limits and prove himself on the grandest stage. His ambition is not something that can be easily contained. For HYBE, This duality, gratitude on one side, ambition on the other, creates both comfort and fear. Comfort, because they know Jungkook values his roots. Fear, because ambition can sometimes outgrow loyalty. And once an artist discovers their power, it is difficult to unlearn. Ultimately, the fascination with Jungkook's US move is not just about music. It is about watching an unfolding drama where culture, business, and emotion collide. Fans want to see him succeed. Critics want to analyze the risks. And industry insiders want to predict who will win this silent tug-of-war between HYBE and America. Every performance, every collaboration, and every public statement adds another layer to the story. Will Jungkook become the first true global superstar of this generation, seamlessly blending East and West? Or will his success create fractures that even HYBE cannot repair? For now, all anyone can do is watch. But one thing is certain. This is no longer just about an artist's career, it's about the future of the global music industry itself.